Okay, the next thing we're going to take a look at is the proper incubator location at your campus. Where should you put this in your classroom? Well, first of all, it should be on a very stable table. It should not shake or wobble or move. Never put it under an air conditioning vent or heating duct, not near a window or door or any area that might have an air draft. Of course, not in the direct sunlight. Should not be in a place where it might get bumped or jarred or moved with student traffic or anybody walking by. We always want to use this as the bottom line. Don't do anything to your eggs that the mother hen wouldn't do to her eggs if she were doing this. So she would not put her eggs in any of these places that we just mentioned above. They'd be on the ground in a stable, quiet, cool nest on the ground. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to take a look at your incubator kit. And of course, when you receive it, it'll look like this. It'll be a big plastic box of some style or sort. It will have a colored photo on the front. And actually, the colored photo is all the different parts that are in the incubator kit box. And we put it on there, of course, for you to see if all the parts are in there, and really to be sure that all these parts are returned to the box, when you're finished working with this. Okay, through the years, we've noticed that there are 2 items in the kit that do not get returned to the outdoor center most often. And one of them is the black Turnin Box, which we'll talk about later. It looks like that. The other item is the red and white water fountain that we use to water the chicks. And we think we know why. This Turnin Box is removed on the 18th day and set aside somewhere, and often lost, or someone will misplace it or put it in storage. And we found out when you remove it, if you put it back into the empty kit box, it more likely will make it back to the outdoor center when we're finished with all this. This, of course, is for watering the chicks after they hatch, and often the chicks are kept at the school for a week or 2 after hatching. So that's probably the reason this is the second most not returned thing in the box. But please check all the items, be sure they're in the box before you return the kit. Okay, next we're going to take a look at each item in the kit and identify the part. And then after that, we're going to assemble all these parts into a working incubator. We'll go back to this one. This was called the egg turning box, and its function is to actually rotate the eggs back and forth, not actually turn them around and around in a circle. It actually rotates the eggs back and forth. It rolls them in an action very much like the hen would do if she were sitting on the eggs, that she rolls them in one direction and back in the other direction. This actually happens every hour, but it's a very subtle, quiet thing. You're not going to notice it in your classroom. I know you have 22 or more students in that room. There are a lot of things going on, so you wouldn't normally notice this turning action, but it is happening every hour or so, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. The egg turning box. One of the other items I already mentioned was the red and white water bottle. Of course, this is not part of the incubator. This is to water the chicks in after they've hatched. We call this the blue base of the incubator. And of course, that's what it is. All the parts sit on this base. Notice that there are compartments in the blue base. Notice there's a socket in the blue base where it appears that something fits into the socket. We'll talk about that in just a minute. There's a hole that also comes out just about where the socket is. So the blue base with the compartments and the socket and the hole. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. This part is called the egg turning ring, and it'll go in the incubator just like that. The eggs would be placed in these compartments. There are actually 12 of them. You won't be receiving 12 eggs. You most likely you'll be receiving 9 eggs. When you put them in here, you want to balance them as much as possible. Not all 9 on one side, so space them equally as much as you can. The egg turning ring has the 2 thermometers bolted to it. One of the thermometers is vertical. It goes up and down. It's mounted up and down in an up and down direction. It has a cloth wick around its bulb, and there's a little fastener that holds the wick onto the bulb of this vertical thermometer. We're going to call that the wet bulb thermometer. The thermometer that's in a horizontal position is called the dry bulb thermometer, and of course that's because the bulb on that thermometer is dry and it will remain dry. It's going to be measuring the dry air temperature. Remember, the vertical one was called the wet bulb thermometer. It's because it has the wick on it, and later we're going to get this wick wet. When we get the wick wet, it's going to give us a wet bulb temperature reading. So wet bulb vertical, dry bulb horizontal. They're mounted to the egg turning ring. And around the edge we have something we call the plastic strap. It kind of makes a place, a nice secure place to put the eggs. And I want to point out something else. The plastic strap has a notch in it. No, you can't see it because it's transparent, but there's a notch here, and then directly across there's a notch in the plastic strap here. There's also a notch here and one here. The way we call this whole assembly the egg ring turning assembly, and that includes the strap, the egg ring, the 2 thermometers, and the wick. The next part we're going to take a look at is the floor of the incubator, and it's made out of metal. It's like perforated metal, and it will of course sit on top of the blue base, and we'll talk specifically how we're going to place it on there in a few minutes. But I want you to take a look at a couple of things here. There's one big hole right in the center of the perforated floor. We'll be talking about that more later. And what's also important, there are 4 other holes that have been punched in the perforated floor, and this one side of the floor you can actually feel the little cones where the hole's been punched out. Can you see that?
Yes.
And on the other side, of course, it's flat. That's going to become very important later, because this floor has to be placed in the proper position. This is the proper position, by the way, with a little bump sort of up. If you put them down, it causes the floor not to be seated correctly in the center of everything. So we'll talk more about that, more specifically about probably the most important part of the incubator. We call this the clear acrylic dome. It's acrylic plastic. You can see through it. You can see everything that's happening in there. This, of course, has the heating coil in it. It's got a fan motor in there. It's got an outlet on the top where you're going to be plugging in the egg turning box later. And it's got the power cord. This, of course, goes to the power outlet. This is what supplies electricity to keep the incubator heated, as well as power the fan, as well as power the egg turning box when you have it in place.